So in the previous tutorial video, we show you the simplest syntax for the for loop. Especially we show you how you can trace the program using flowchart and also tabular tracing over here, and also using debugger. Make sure you review those before you go on with the current video. Let's show the integration with scanner using for loop. Let's have a very simple application, and you can be more creative for your lab exercises. Okay. So now let's just create a new class over here. Let's right click on the projects and say new class. Let's say for loop, let's say app. Okay, app simply means we got input and output from the user, and then for the main method here. Okay, let's make it very easy. So now what we would do is, previously what we would do is we simply prompt, let's say we want to prompt the user for 3 integers. Okay. Previously, what we have, let's say 3 integers, you're gonna say system and out the print line, enter integer 1. System and out the output of print line, enter integer 2. System and out the print line, enter integer 3. You're gonna repeat the same prompt messages 3 times. So now with the for loop, you don't have to do it anymore. Okay, that's why for loop can really automate repetitive actions in a way that you can still achieve the same output. Okay, so now let's see exactly how you can do that. Okay. So now let's say scanner, and then input is assigned to new scanner, and then system.end, and also input.close over here. So now let's say the problem is simply, okay, let's say what we want to do is, the problem is prompt the user to enter, let's say, you know what, I wouldn't mind, let's say even 5 integers. That I will even illustrate the point. To enter 5 integers, then calculate their average. Okay, exactly 5 integers. Okay, let me show you the evolution to using a for loop. Let's say without the for loop version to the for loop version. Without the for loop, how will we do it? You're gonna say system.out.println over here. Let's say enter integer 1. Okay, and then you're gonna say input integer I is assigned to let's say integer 1. How about that? I1 is input dot next int. So how do we prompt for the rest of the 4 integers? Well, we're gonna repeat the same block of code. So what I can do is I can copy this. Okay, copy, and then I can simply enter. Okay, I can say integer I2 over here, integer 2 over here. Okay, and then I can paste it again. I can say integer 3, and then I3 over here, and then I can say integer 4, and then I4. Okay, and then finally, you can see how tedious this can be, even though it can be correct, but this is not something you would like to do when things get big. What if I want you to prompt the user for 100 integers? I'm going to copy and paste for 100 times. Maybe you can do it, but it's not so convenient. So that's why loop will be a very nice way to automate repetitive things for you. Okay, so this is how you would do it. Okay, once you get I1 up to I5, you can calculate the average very easily. But that's how you do it without a loop. So now, since we know about for loop, and this is exactly what the kind of scenario you can use for loop. It is when you know the fixed number of repetitions you want to do. In this case, 5 times, right? Okay, let me just comment this out. Okay, let me just as a note for you. Okay, so I can say version without using a for loop. Okay, just keep yourself reminded that without a for loop, how inconvenient it could be. Okay, so now how about we use a for loop? Okay, we can simply, okay, for, okay, integer I is 1, I less than or equal to 5. So now as soon as, so starting with 1, so it can be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. All these 5 values is going to make I less than or equal to 5 true, right? As soon as I is incremented to 6, 6 less than or equal to 5 will be false. That means exactly 5 iterations, right? You can say I plus plus. By the way, equivalently, which we'll discuss in class, you can write in this way. That will also work. Integer I is assigned to 0, I less than or equal to 4, and then I plus plus. This will also guarantee 5 iterations. Think about why. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 5 numbers can make this particular Boolean state condition true. As soon as I is incremented to 5, it's going to make it false, right? But starting value is 0 rather than 1. So this will also work. I will just make this one here just as a reference for you. You can definitely use either, okay? So now let's say this. So now we're going to use this kind of repetition over here. So now outside the scope for the for loop, we're going to share the same scanner. Okay, so now we already got a scanner over here. Remember, we declared a scanner. So scanner can actually be used inside a subscope for the for loop, right? We talk about scopes and subscopes in the class, right? So now what we can do is we can say system.out.println. That's exactly the prompt we would like to repeat for every iteration. INTLN. Okay, and then over here we can say enter integer and plus. That's why I deliberately have chosen the value for I to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's going to be exactly the same as before. Okay, and then we can put a colon over here. Okay, enter that, and now we can actually try to receive the integer. Actually try to read the integer from the user. So now let's say, since the ultimate goal is really to calculate the average, so why don't we try to follow? I'll show you some use of variable over here, but you can try to learn from that. So what we can do is we can say integer total is initially just 0, which means the total is declared outside the scope for the for loop, which means this can be used inside the subscope for this particular for loop, right? Not vice versa, okay? If you declare anything inside the for loop specifically, you cannot use it outside the for loop, okay? So you can refer to the if statement lecture where we talk about variable scope. Okay, so over here you can say total over here plus equal, which is equivalent to total is assigned to total plus something, right? Plus equal, and then you can simply say I in this case, right? Oh, actually not I, beg your pardon. So what we should do is we should really try to read in the integer from the user. So over here you can say integer I is assigned to let's say input dot next int. So this simply means every time actually we already got I, right? Okay, so actually got the name clashes over here because you already chose the local the loop counter to be I. So you cannot clash with it. So now what about I just say X? So each user input variable will just be X. So now you can think about for every iteration, we're simply just going to use this particular, we just declare new local variable called X, and then use that to store whatever value the user enter. And then what we'll try to accumulate X into the total. Okay, so now that means as soon as we exit from the loop, total will become the sum of the 5 integers the user entered. I'll trace a program with you using debugger. Okay, and then alternatively, you can either try to say X is local to this particular subscope, or you can do the following too. You can say integer X is initially 0, and then X is simply reassigned to input and X in. That's also fine. Okay, depending on which one you prefer. Okay, they work the same way. They will achieve the same purpose for this case. The only difference is if you declare X outside the scope for the for loop, that means you can also refer to X. Let's say over here, you can still say system.out.println X over here. Okay, in line number 37. That you can do it. But if you put the declaration for input X over here is assigned to input and X in this case, the scope for X is only limited to this particular subscope. That means in line number 37, if you say system.out.println X, it will not compile, right? The same idea for the scope for if statements. Okay, let me keep this particular version for now. Okay, and now over here, how do we calculate the average, right? We want to make sure you don't have integer divided by integer, which will only give you the quotients. So you want to do a cast. So you can say system.out. Let me just do this. Double average is assigned to, so you can try to cast the total into a double. Okay, let me be safe. I'm going to use parentheses to force the order of evaluation, and then divided by, in this case, 5, right? Okay, got 5 integers. Okay, notice one thing. I'll let you think about it. Here we cannot say use I as the denominator. Why? Which means if I simply say divided by I over here is going to be false. Okay. Oh, well, first of all, it will not compile. Well, you know what? Let me save this discussion maybe to the class. Okay. Let me just I don't want to complicate the matter. Okay. Let me just take it out. Okay. I will discuss this a little bit later. Okay. For now, you don't have to worry. Okay. Just put 5 because we want to calculate the average for 5 numbers only. Okay. And that will do it. Okay, and then we're gonna say system.out print line over here, and then we can say average is, and then you can say average. Okay, you can see that we only need these lines of code as opposed to repeating so many times over here, right? Okay, that's the advantage of using loop. Now let's try to run the program and then see how it behaves. Once we're convinced it behaves well, let's use a debugger to trace it. Okay, and then we're done. So now I would say right click on the class and say run as Java application. Okay, enter integer 1. Let me just say, let's say 10 and then 20, right? You can see 30 and 40 and then 50. So now the average is simply 30.0. I think that's correct, right? So that program is working correctly, but now we want to see exactly how to trace it. Okay, so now what I would like to do is I would like to actually put a breakpoint over here right at line number 32. It's right before we try to execute the for loop, right? So now we want to see exactly how the 5 iteration is going to be executed. It's really important for you to see. So we're going to see exactly 5. There'll be 5 times. If you remember how we evaluate the previous, how we trace the previous for loop in the previous video, how many times that the state condition over here is going to be evaluated to true is going to determine how many times you're going to repeat the body of the loop. Now in this case, we expect that I less than or equal to 5 is going to be true for 5 times, right? That means we're going to repeat this particular body of the loop for 5 times. For the 6th time, when I is incremented from 5 to 6, 6 less than or equal to 5 is going to be false. That means we don't really execute this for the 6th time, and then we go directly to the calculation for the rest of the program. Okay, that's kind of like a preview of what's going to happen. But we're going to verify this using the debugger. It's really important for you to see that. Okay, so now what we will do is right click on this class over here, and then say debug as Java application. Okay, so now we are at line number 32. Okay, over here. And by the way, we are now also in the debug perspective already, right? You can see the debug, right? If you want to switch back, you can click on J over here. But let's stay with the debug. Also, you got your variables, you got your expressions. If you don't see them, you can go to Window, Show View, and then you can see the expressions. You can see the variables as well. Okay, let's see that. So now, also let me go to expressions over here. Let me delete, remove the previous ones we put. Right click and say remove all. Okay, so we can get it 100% clear. So now at the moment, we already executed line number 30, right? So that means total has just the value of 0. Okay, but we have not executed the header of the for loop yet. So that means the loop counter is simply not declared yet, not yet. Okay, and now let's see what we can do. So now, as soon as we say step over, what's going to happen is this: the loop counter I is going to be initialized to be 1, and also we will execute the we will evaluate the state condition I is less than or equal to 5 for the very first time, right? So 1 less than or equal to 5 will give us true. Okay, so now this is what we get, but I'm just gonna put it here. We want to see what the value for I is. At the moment, I is not declared just yet, but we're gonna put it here first, and then I less than or equal to 5 is going to be that. Okay, so now for the very first time, let me say step over, you will see that step over here, you can see I initialized to be 1, and 1 less than or equal to 5 is going to give me true. That means I'm entering the body of the loop, which is from line number 33 to line number 35 for the very first time, right? And then if I say step over, it's going to say enter integer I. At the moment, I, if you move your mouse over, is 1. Okay, so now if you say step over, you're going to see from the console over here, enter integer 1, which makes sense. And then over here, we are pausing here because we are waiting for the user to actually enter an integer from the keyboard, right? Let me say enter, let's say 10. Okay, as soon as I hit enter, input.nextInt is just going to be 10, and then 10 will be stored inside X. Okay, before I do that, let me just go to expressions over here. I can also put X over here. Okay, X is not declared just yet, but I'll put it here first. And then I also got total over here. At the moment, total is just 0. If I say step over, oh, oops, I forgot. I should really say enter over here. Okay, hit enter from 10. So now you can see that after 10, you can see the execution flow arrow moves from 34 to 35. So now if you look at the expressions over here, X is 10. But total has not been accumulated just yet because now we are pausing right before we try to execute line number 35. Okay, so now what's going to happen if we say step over here? If we say step over, that means total plus equal X, which is 10. So that means we're going to increment 10 to total. If I say step over, you can see that step over, that means total becomes 10. And now, because we now go back to the loop, and the local variable will just be redeclared a little bit later. Okay, so now what we have is we now go back to line number 32, and now the initialization is not going to be executed anymore because it only executed once. So now let's try this. I is simply, so now we are at the end of the loop over here. So now don't forget we're going to execute I++. I++ is going to increment I from 1 to 2. And then 2 less than or equal to 5 is going to give me true. So these two things will be done when I say step over. Okay, let's try. If I say step over here, you can see that I has been incremented to 2. And then 2 less than equal to 5 is still true, right? And then we can execute this one here. So now enter integer, and I will just be 2. Okay, if I say step over here, you can say enter integer 2. And then if I say 20 over here, if I say enter over here, and then I gotta say step over again. So now I can, actually two things you gotta do. You gotta say enter, and then from the keyboard, you also gotta say set step over. Which means now if you go back to expressions, X is now storing 20, right? In the previous iteration, it stored 10. It's now storing 20. But now we're going to increment 20 into total, right? We have not done that yet. So now, right before we try to execute line number 35, you can see we got a new value from the user being 20, and the accumulated value from the previous iteration for total being 10. But I'm going to increment further. So if I say step over, that means total plus equal 20, right? So that'll be 10 plus 20, which will be 30. If I say, so watch what's going to happen for the total, right? If I say step over, it's now going to be incremented to 30, right? So now we are back to the header again. So now what's going to happen again is going to increment the value for I at the end of the iteration from 2 to 3. And then 3 less than or equal to 5 is going to give me true, right? So now if I try to step over again, so now you can see 3 over here for the I after I++, and 3 less than or equal to 5 is still good. Okay, let me just go a little bit faster until the very last iteration so we can see. Okay, so now if I can see over here, so now if I enter 30 over here, enter, and then I say step over. So now if you go to expressions over here, okay, we got 30, and then we're gonna increment that. So let's do that. Step over, you can say 30 was added to total. So it's now, so far it's 60, right? So 10, 20, and 30 so far. And now we're going to do the following. We're going to execute I++ from 3, and that will give us 4, right? And then 4 less than or equal to 5 will still be true. Okay, so now if I say step over, you can see I has become 4. So that means we're going to execute the body for once more. And then we're going to step over, so now integer 4, and then let's say 40 over here, and then enter, and then I'll say step over. So now you can see the expressions here. So you can see total remained to be 60 from the previous iteration, but we're going to add in 40, okay, by executing line number 35. If I say step over, so now you can see that it becomes 100, right? Hopefully you see the idea about the debugger, right? You can see as our program becomes more and more complicated, this is exactly the kind of tracing technique you want to have. Otherwise, you just cannot fix your code. Okay. So now for line 32, so what we'll do is we're going to increment. We're going to execute the increments over here, I++. So it's going to go from 4 up to 5. And then 5 less than equal to 5 will still be true. So that means we're going to enter the 5th time. Okay, so now if you say step over, you can see I will be 5 over here. And then 5 less than 5, less than or equal to 5 will still be true. And then we'll simply go to the next line. So now what should we enter? Let's say we enter 50. Enter, and then you say step over. So now total, if you look at the expressions over here, total will be 100 for the moment, but it's going to be incremented from 100 to 150 by adding x, right? Let's now step over line number 35. So you can see that total has been incremented to 150. Okay, so now finally, let's have a look. It's really crucial point, because if you can just keep executing line number 33 to line number 35, it's an infinite loop. That's not what you want. You want your loop to eventually terminate. So now I is currently 5. Now we are at the end of the 5th iteration, but we are going to execute I++ once more. Okay, so now 5++ will give us 6. Now 6 less than or equal to 5 will give us false. That means we're going to exit from the loop. That means we're going to bypass the body of the loop. So now as soon as I say step over, you can see that, well, you just go to line number 38, right? We don't really execute this anymore because we've done that 5 times. And now the state condition over here is already false, because I has become, if you look at the value for I over here, actually I is already gone. Okay, it's only within the scope for the for loop, so we cannot see I anymore. Okay, so now how do we calculate average? Now it's very easy, because now you can see that it's very valuable that we kept accumulating the value for total inside for each iteration. So now total is simply 150. Now if we cast that into a double, that'll be 150.0 divided by 5 is going to give us the precision value. Now you can try different values for yourself. Okay, if we try that, you can see that over here, average, if you look at the variables, total is 150 and average will be 30.0. That's exactly right. And now, can we predict what's going to happen when you say average is? If you move your mouse over, average is 30.0. And if we say step over, it's exactly what you will see at the console. Okay, so now it's again a very complete tracing for a for loop over here, especially with input and output behavior in your program. So I would say again, the reason that I really try to spend time going over this step by step with you is because it's a very important technique for you to really see how you can analyze your program using debugger and breakpoint. It's really important. Number one, it can strengthen your understanding about the for loop. Number two, when you make any tiny mistake in the for loop, going over step by step is the only way to go for you to reveal the errors. Okay, when the TA or the instructor is not around you, you are the only one to save yourself. Okay, try to practice this. If you got trouble, let me know.